All right. Hi. For many years, I thought that the most challenging task a music composer can be given is to compose the opera. Today, I'm going to show you that I was wrong. Now, with the GDS talks and Kingdom Come Deliverance music, there already was one talk held by my colleague Adam Sporka. It happened 3 years ago, and I checked that talk of his just recently to know what he covered. He actually covered everything important or interesting, as you see. He was talking about the things such as what the hell you need to your music in your project for, if it's so expensive, you know, and musicians are rather complicated people. Also, he was talking about the music design in our game. He mentioned all the special features, including our seamless transition system, which is something I'm personally very proud of. And he was talking about technical solutions and showing his music engine. So the question is, if he did this in 2015, what's in it for me now? So here goes. It might be not that fancy, but I hope that I will give you some practical information, perhaps some things you might not know about making music for games. And I will also be focusing on the communication in between the composer and the rest of the team, which I would say, especially by games as Kingdom Come Deliverance was, open world RPGs, complicated stuff, story-driven, is very, very important. Now, introducing Kingdom Come Deliverance, I will not do this. You know, so many people did before, and I believe that most of you have probably heard about our project. But I will introduce in Kingdom Come Deliverance from sort of my way, my point of view, from a musical standpoint. So in the game we have over 5 hours of original music. If I say original music, it means it's no licensed tracks. It was all composed exclusively for that game. Plus I also mean that we didn't use that kind of Control-C, Control-V composing. So every minute, every bit of the music is being original. Also, because of that system of seamless transition I was mentioning before, we have 1 hour of transitional patterns, transitions, just tiny little bits of music through which we connect from track to track. So if you put them together, it would be one track long. And as they are actually a part of the soundtrack, that's why we did it that way, I might actually say we have 6 hours of music in our soundtrack, which makes it rather lengthy. Speaking about sort of like tracks in a manner of compositions, we have over 200 tracks. And yeah, I also saw in some talks of other composers that they usually try to pride themselves with how many themes they invented for their particular project and so on. I would love to do the same, but you know, I kept kind of a musical diary with just a simple melody above and a very simple keyboard accompaniment under it with the name of the theme and so on. I did it until I reached number 30. That was in 2016 in February, and the game was released 2 years after. So I would say there was a lot more than that. And yeah, just to give you a quick overview, we had kind of, well, you can divide the music in many ways, like sad, happy, you know, good and bad. But this is the dividing I like, because it shows the way of the producing the music. So we have 5 types of music. We had this live recorded symphony orchestra. We hired 60 musicians. We hired the Dvořák Hall of Prague's Rudolfinum. The coffee there is nothing special, but the acoustic beats it. And we were recording in one day for 3 sessions, from 9 morning till 11 p.m. and then there was the after party. Also, we were recording 2 other live recordings. One was with a group of period instrument called Bacchus. They are really nice guys, and they were recording medieval tracks. And we were also recording men's choir in a church for the Gregorian chant, which those of you who played our game know is sung in the Sasa monastery. These 2 medieval parts of our soundtrack are the creation of my colleague Adam Sporka I've been talking about already. Yeah, so much for the live tracks. And then of course we had a lot of music which was produced from samples. Actually, most of the in-game music was done that way. And again, we can divide it into like bigger tracks using most of the symphony orchestra instruments, or we can talk about slightly smaller, shorter pieces of music. They more resemble this medieval kind of music. Now, this is like a quick overview of what we have done, of course, plus quite a lot of adaptivity. And the adaptivity is the key, always, with music in the games. And it's also something which makes it all much more difficult. Now, what it means in a matter of manpower. This is maybe something you didn't see yet. I started working on Kingdom Come Deliverance somewhere July 2014. That's when Daniel Vávra called me and offered me this job. And I finished adding the last of the musical assets, last composition and last production of it, somewhere in August 2017. So it was more than 3 years straight, and I thought like, okay, I'm finished, I'm done, let's go have a beer. No. We spent quite a lot of time in the autumn with my colleague Adam, making all the testing. You know, we were testing the music in the game because, as many of my colleagues from Warhorse Studios already said in his talks, that's a specialty of the RPG and open world games, that they somehow tend to not make any sense or that much sense until they are nearly finished. So it's actually very difficult to get the picture up. It's actually very difficult to test the things. So we had all the features, and finally in autumn the game started to make some sense for us, you know, and we started to be like, yeah, this is gonna be good probably, you know. And we were testing the music, and we changed a lot of things last minute. I mean, not assets. It's not in a state you can say like, this chord isn't fancy enough, let's change it. That's done already. But you can decide things kind of how often the music plays, or where there is a silence, which track can be after another track and which cannot, and these things, and they actually are extremely important. Right, all this, I kept a record. I do have another diary, save for the musical one, which I abandoned, where I keep just simple record kind of date, how many hours and what I've been doing. For Kingdom Come Deliverance, I better started with an extra file, and it was a correct decision. So I have about 2,500 recorded hours, but it will be probably much more. Why so? As you might imagine, composing music, as any other creative process, is a bit special job. I mean, you can't do it like from 9 to 4, Monday to Friday. Even if you try, you'll fail. There are moments you know what to do and you can work like 36 hours straight, even without drugs, incredible. But also, there are moments when you are stuck, when you are sort of desperate, when you don't know what to do next. And in that moment, it would be probably wise to make a break and go for a walk or something. It's not only a problem of mine. The same way, for instance, the best Czech composer in the world, actually the best Czech composer of all, Antonín Dvořák, he was doing the same. I mean, I'm not comparing himself with him, don't worry, but just like to let you know, he started working very early, not my type, and he was working till lunch. After lunch he took a nap and he was having a walk. He lived at Vinohrady, so he was just walking there, you know, all these beautiful places for all the afternoon. Then he had the dinner, he was working shortly after that, and he went to bed. And I'm absolutely sure that all these brilliant musical ideas, themes, motives and everything, all the wonderful solutions and instrumental tricks came up to his mind not when he was sitting at the table or by the piano by then, you know, and typing music, no. By then he was just typing what came up to his mind when he was having this walk. And I was actually the same. I mean, the best ideas I've had came when I was changing diapers of one of my twins, or when I held, you know, 2 bags full of groceries and I tried to, you know, open the door of my flat, something like that. So this is the moment. What I want to say with it is that if you do such a big project and if you do creative work, you actually work even if you don't work. But okay, let's say 3,000 hours, my best guess. And then there is the work of Adam, my colleague. Just shortly how we split the work. I was that, you know, mostly musical guy and he was that mostly technical guy, but it overlaid. That means, like, as I said, he was composing some of the tracks and also I was contributing to the design of the music. So we might say roughly, because we were equal about the number of, about the time we spent on this project, I would say it was like 6,000 manpower hours, which is a lot. Yeah. Now, music department. Let's talk about shortly what should it look like and who's doing what. I write ideal, but it's actually standard, you know. Ideal might look to us, but I've got what I'm going to tell you. This is something I've got from a guy I worked for. I orchestrated some of his film, and he works for Zimmer in Hollywood. So this is like a Hollywood standard by AAA titles. Probably nothing that unusual. So, musical department, what do you need? Well, that's surprising. Okay, you need a composer. Sometimes, as for example, in case of my colleague Adam, you do have additional composers. It's usually done that way that the main composer makes, you know, the most of the soundtrack, and the additional composer is focusing in one rather independent part of the soundtrack. That's why Adam took these live recorded medieval tracks. And actually, I should probably say that, you know, they were not like medieval. It was a 15th century music, but composed in 21st century by him. Right, so that was his part. Now, speaking of composers, I might probably tell you this. There are actually two types of them. First type of composers is composing through this rather fancy picture. This is a DAW, which is abbreviation for Digital Audio Workstation, and composers of that kind are composing with already programming the samples and sounds into this software. So, in the end of the day, not only they are finished with composing and can go drinking, but also they sort of have like almost good working mock-up demo version of the recording, almost ready to send it to the director or producer or music supervisor or whoever they are responsible to. Now, then there is the other type of guys, composers. They compose through this. Yeah, I know this is probably not that fancy, but anyway. They simply type in the typical score first, and then when they need a mock-up or demo recording, they just export a MIDI file from the notation software, they put it into here, and they make the production. Which is rather a bit more complicated about the time. On the other hand, especially for that kind of a music we have in Kingdom Come Deliverance, like a symphony music with, say, melodies, tunes, and I think one of the most important things in music is the voice leading. So in that kind of music, it is always good to compose into a score, because not only you hear things very properly and clearly, but also you do see them the way the musicians will see them when they get their music on their stands. So much for these two types. Now, originally I wanted to throw a question, you know, into the audience, like, what kind of a guy you think I am, whether I'm this one or that one, but probably we all realized that I actually spoiled the answer, because this and this is the same composition, you know, you see. This is here, you know, and this here, yeah. Anyway, so let's skip that question. Yeah, FX operators. What are they doing? FX operators are actually doing this, simply to say. And if you ask what for, a composer who is composing in a Digital Audio Workstation needs them, it's, as I said, you know, you get, in the end of the day, you get a nearly working demo recording, but not completely finished. So usually, typically, the composer, adds the mostly creative stuff and all the things that are like necessary to be there, but rather clear how to do them, he lets onto his co-workers. That's why there are 2 or 3 FX operators in such a team, because there is a lot of work to be done. Then, yeah. Music supervisor. Honestly, I don't have any experience with that. The only music supervisor I had by Kingdom Come Deliverance and its music was Daniel Vávra himself, and that was just great. I'm going to show you in the second part of my talk. But I can imagine that music supervisor is either someone who knows a lot, or at least someone who knows someone. Now, I can imagine that if it's a pair of trained ears, clever man, somebody, or clever girl, somebody who knows a lot about music, it can be a huge asset. If not, it can be maybe a real pain in the ass. Okay, these can live together happily ever after until the recording session with the orchestra emerges. Then you need somebody called an orchestrator. Now, what the hell an orchestrator is doing? I'm gonna show you, because I think this is something which is often misinterpreted, you know. So this, what you see here, is an example of a MIDI file drawn from DAW, from this audio workstation, and put into notation software. This is how it looks. It's the representation of it in the score. Now, you don't need to be musical geniuses. If you are, I'm sorry, to see that there are some rather fuzzy low notes like this one here and this one there. Also here it's very low. Nobody can read so many lines. Also this rhythm looks as if somebody went totally crazy. Yeah, there is also absolutely no indication of how the music should be played. Is it like, should it be soft? Should it be strong? Should it be volume up, volume down? What's all this about? So the orchestrator comes, he takes this and he does his wizardry, and ta-da! You are staring at the same 4 bars as before, but it's properly orchestrated. I know it may be quite difficult to see this in this, but try to follow at least this. Here you see the trumpets, right? It's written there, so really don't need to be genius to see that. And then there is this rhythm, da-da-da, you see this, like some notes, okay. And it's written for 4 trumpets. Now here, you have the same. You see the trumpets, they are here. So it's divided because there is going to be 3 trumpet players, and each of them has to play just a single note. Then also, as you noticed, originally there were 4 voices in that chord. You can see that because there are 4 big black dots. For the people in the back row, 4 little black dots, but whatever. But what happened was that about the day before the recording, the production called the orchestrator, which was inevitably me in this case, and they told me like, okay, you know, we originally wanted to have 4 trumpets, but you know, the budget was cut and everything. You must go on with 3 only. If something like this happens, and it happens actually very often, the orchestrator is entitled and obliged to fill in somewhere else. So the original 4th voice of the trumpet I put into trombone, which looks like, okay, problem solved. It is not so, because the trombone already had to play something else in that cue. So I had to postpone his piece of music, his voice, into another instrument, and so on. Also, you see that there are lots of dynamics, markings, you know, all these fortes, forzato, piano, crescendo, hairpins, and all this stuff. This is actually very important. Just quick example. For instance, like here, okay, if I say forte, molto, espressivo, loud and with lots of expression, wouldn't just the proper forte be enough? No, it wouldn't. I'm going to tell you why. Because the violins, this is the 1st and 2nd violin playing together in unison, the same line, but they play long note. And above them, there are these trumpets, they are moving, you know, in this rhythm. So the violinists might think like, okay, if I'm having a low note, probably this is not that interesting as this movement in brass. So they would go down with the dynamic. When they see molto espressivo, they know they are the main line all throughout, and they will just do whatever they can, depending on the salary they get, of course. So one of the examples. Also, you see things like, you know, here there are the dots above or under the notes, you know, that's like staccato, short notes. Here are the long notes with the tenuti. Or, for instance, then there is the indication concertino, which means with the mute, which completely changes the sound of the trumpet. Now, if you know all this and you would stare at this, yeah, not only this is useless, but also there are no these indications. So this is basically the job of an orchestrator. Originally, I wanted to show you, because I'm a score guy, what for I would need an orchestrator, but I'm not sure if we have enough time because we are a bit delayed. Right, I'm already composing into the scores. What for I might need an orchestration. So this is a piece of music which I've composed. It's just few bars, 5 of them. They do represent about 7 seconds of music. I know that because I was counting it yesterday in order to be clever today. So this is like, it's okay. It's not bad. It looks rather neat, right? And now I'm going to show you the orchestrator version. Yeah, you might see that there are some differences, but definitely not as big as from the previous one. And you are right. Because I'm a score guy, I'm already composing a score in a rather classical way. So if you will give this music to a conductor and musicians, they might play it from it, and it will sound somehow. What it wouldn't deliver, it wouldn't sound strong enough, passionate enough, full of emotions. Actually, all the things what for you pay the musicians and the composer in your project. So that's why all the indications and markings are necessary. Again, just very shortly, I know this is probably harder than the previous because these are more similar, but if you can, take a look at the middle lines. By the way, this is just 1/3 of the height of the score. What you see here, these are the woodwinds, these are brass, and here there is a timpani. Then above the timpani, going down to the first or to some basement, there are a bunch of another percussive instruments, keyboards, harp, choir, and strings, and there is a lot of strings. So this is probably 1/3 of the score. The important thing about orchestration is it is not only a matter of notography and theory of music, but it's also a bit of a psychology. For instance, if you write mezzo forte to a first trumpet player, he would play forte anyway because he knows he's the lead, and he wants to enjoy that. They all play louder, so you always give them like slightly less dynamic than to the others. By the way, this 5 bars, if you played our game, I'm not sure how many of you did. How many of you did play Kingdom Come Deliverance? Is there anyone? It's actually not that bad. Thank you. Yeah, company thanks you. So you are starring at the last 5 bars of the life of a blacksmith in Skalitz, who happens to be the father of our main character, Henry. So I mean, like, with this double bar, this one of the big villains, later known as Markfart von Aulitz, kills your father. And this is actually one of the most important moments in the game. If you think about it, this is where it all starts. When our main hero loses his family, loses his home, he also loses his childhood. So he has to grow up, and he better do that very soon, otherwise he won't survive. So, just a quick show how the orchestration might look. Right, now, copist, very quickly. Again, this score, take a look at this upper stave. So this is a score which a conductor gets, music director gets, and of course, the composer is constantly working with this. And if you see this upper line, you don't need to be too much into reading notes, but you see that there are some rapid notes here, and it ends with forte fortissimo. Now I'm going to show you this, and it's the same. It's the part of a first flute, but it's just a separate one. So you see the rapid notes here, the crescendo, and the forte fortissimo. So what the copyist is doing is that he takes every individual line of the score, and some of the lines are represented by 2 instruments. So every instrument, every individual voice, and create the independent part for it in order for the musicians to be played what they are allowed to play, or they should play. In a manner of numbers, it meant, I can't remember, but I think we recorded about 90 minutes of music, and that meant about 1,500 individual parts. Some of them are like 1 page, some of them are like 3-4 pages. It's a hell of a lot of work for just one recording. Okay, so this is copy. Sound engineer, I don't think I need to explain that much, but as we are talking about games, not films, here's one advice. If you do want to hire a sound engineer specifically on music, which you better do, because if you do big project, it is necessary. It is always good to kind of let him be involved as soon as possible, at an early stage of the development probably, because he will have many things to do, many things to solve, many things to enhance as well. So, I think that's it. Yeah, of course, others probably, notably the musicians. Now, our team. So what we did have, we had, yeah, I don't know, it would be cool if that would be all, but we had some aid. But actually, there, as you will see, there were some seats that were missing, and we had to substitute with Adam. So I will fulfill it like this, and here goes. So as you see, I was composing, making the orchestrations, conducting, and also I was making the production in samples of all the music I composed. The same Adam did with his music, which he did as an additional composer. He produced it. He also coded the music engine, which was originally created for our game, and he was mainly the adaptive music designer. So yeah, I would say like we were doing a job for about 6 people or something. And then of course we did have a sound engineer, Ondřej Urban, probably the best one in the country, if not in the whole universe. And we did have a copist. Yeah, but other than that, we were all alone on this. So which leads back to this. What took us so long on just one soundtrack to one game? Well, 2,500 hours or 3,000 hours. Not only I counted the hours in my diary, one day I also, I'm just crazy for such things, time from time. I went through it and I realized that this is how I can divide the work. So 1/3 of the time I spent as a composer on this project cost me the production in samples. Another 1/3 goes for all the design decisions, meetings, Skype calls, other calls, messages, sitting somewhere with a piece of paper and trying to draft some kind of a scheme or diagram of a next feature, how this is going to work, and so on. This is really, it takes a lot of time, which leads me to only 1/3 of my time being available for the real composing, which may sound like rather sad or strange, but yeah, perhaps the production, we might hire someone. I could be a bit freer. But definitely not the design decisions and these things. I mean, a good composer for a game, for your game as well as for any other, I would say, must be a real member of the team. He must be involved in all these game design decisions and these things. I would say this is very important, otherwise it wouldn't work. You might deliver wonderful music, but it will not work along with the project. Now the second part of the talk. We'll be talking about the first input of you as designers or people from the development team, because it doesn't need to be necessarily just the lead designer, it can be actually anybody. But I've got the first input from Daniel Vávra. It looks better. So he told me a couple of things, like I want to have a symphony orchestra live recorded. I want a music which will resemble more John Williams than Hans Zimmer. I want you to be inspired by the Hollywood golden ages of soundtrack of 60s and 70s. But also, as we are Czechs and we are making a game which is from Bohemia, 15th century, we should be inspired by our own geniuses, not just the Americans. So he mentioned the Czech New Wave and he said these two names, Liška and Fischer, both very fertile composers of film soundtracks of that period. And of course, as another inspiration source, he mentioned classical Czech masters, notably Antonín Dvořák, I was talking about today, and Bedřich Smetana. Now, this is actually something what he told me in about first 2 minutes we met. I remember we haven't even finished the first beer, and I just knew this all. And this is actually exactly what your composer will need to hear from you. Such things, such kind of information. Well, but time moved on. I tried to compose something. I started to work on something as a first track. It was an alpha teaser in 2014, which was then finally released. But it took me about 5 different versions before it was approved. And when I've delivered the third version and Daniel didn't like it enough, he gave me some additional information. Here. So he was like, he wants to feel a bit of nostalgia from the music, a bit of old times, For the Czechs, he used the word starost, but not in a way like take care of somebody, but the oldish thing. And plus he gave me 2 reference tracks. They were rather very different. One was the documentary movie, Czech documentary movie, talking about building a dam over a river. It was like from 1967 or something. Just incredible thing. With quite a beautiful music. I can't remember who was it. And then he gave me William Stromberg's soundtrack to a documentary about nuclear bombs. So those were the reference tracks I've got, but they were also very helpful, and he was telling me what exactly he likes here and there. Now, in order for you to comprehend that this is actually what a first input from the designers for the composer should look like, I'll show you this. How does the composer feel when he starts composing music for a game? I would say all of you have seen this testing area in CryEngine, this empty level, just these, squares and generic sky above your head, nothing, just an empty space. So this is exactly how a composer feels when he starts working on any project of such a size. You are in an endless place, everything's possible, you can just say whatever you want or do whatever you want, and if you just do this, some things start happen. Which is incredible, right? No. it's beautiful up to the moment when you start composing. I mean, I remember those were the happy weeks of my work at Warhorse, maybe the happiest. When I was just sitting in some fancy cafe, and making notes about my brilliant ideas, how I'm gonna make this magnum opus, the best soundtrack of the world. But then you realize that these guys, they gave us the money, would probably wish to get them back, preferably with some interest. So you start working. And music is like, you start with the first note, well, it asks for a second. If you have these two, you sort of know what the third's gonna be. And this way, slowly, you start composing. Now we realize you do have a theme. You already feel some harmonic tendency, some harmonic progression over it, or under it. You also feel the rhythm tension, and you start to think about the instrumentation. Sort of, it starts somehow. And now you realize, like, oh yeah, a couple of weeks, and you already have a couple of tracks finished. And what can happen is that after quite a long time, like say 2 months or something, you may realize, like, oh geez, what I'm doing is not right. Luckily it didn't happen to me, but I did make a couple of wrong decisions at the beginning of the process. The problem is you can't change it. Either you can just go on with it, or you would have to abandon everything you have created so far. If it's just 1 or 2 tracks, it's fine. You do have time to start again. But if it's like an hour of soundtrack or something, no chance. As I've said, this is a limitless space when you start doing your music on some project. But you don't have limitless number of the beginnings. You have just 1, 2 maximum. I'm sorry. Oh, geez. Right. Now, how can you help the composer in order for him not to be frightened with all that freedom? First of all, give him access to all information you have. That might sound like, okay, that's clear, you don't need to tell us. Musicians are sometimes rather special creatures. Your chosen genius might be shy, too shy to ask. Or maybe he's not shy, but he's trained with just working for TV or films. So he asks for a screenplay, but he doesn't know that whereas by film there is just one, like the New Testament, that's the screenplay. Games also have the Old Testament, the other part of the Bible, which is like the design document. And it's also necessary to read that one through. I mean, I did it first couple of days or weeks. It was quite hefty. When I was working in the studio. Yes, sure, 95% of the information I never used at all. Of 5%, just 1% was really important, and the rest was just nice to know. But yet, you need to start somewhere, and you need to obtain as many informations as possible. Also, if you can, let your composer to be the part of the team as soon as possible. And I mean, this is also extremely important thing. I've spent first 2 or 3 weeks with just reading the design documents, trying to compose, which was impossible because, it's a studio, open space, it's a bit noisy, and so on. But yeah, the other good thing I was doing was I went for a lunch with this department on Tuesday, with that department on Wednesday, and with another department on Thursday. And I've met the people, I've asked them, I knew who is doing what, and when I needed help with something, an advice, I knew whom to call or whom to ask. This is extremely important. And also, I might say that this might sound like, too new age or too cliche, but yeah, if you are a member of a team, not only you feel responsible to the lead, to the boss, but you sort of feel like it's the work of all of us, and you try even harder than without that, I would say. So this is a definitely good thing to do. And yeah, as for you and your own input as a, say, designer or team member who's responsible for telling this to the composer, you should give the composer some borders. So he knows, like, this empty, endless field is not endless anymore. It's like, from here to there, this is yours, but not more on any of the sides. Here, there is this simple double equation, like, if you give him no borders, it's wasting of time. It's a waste of time of you both, because you sort of tell him, like, right, just go and do whatever you want, I trust you. Yeah, he will go, he will be happy to be trusted. He will work for 2 weeks, and then he will deliver something you will not like. So, what for it was, and he will spend 3-4 hours explaining why this is all wrong, whereas you could tell him, like, for 1 or 2 hours what you want him to do. So this is one extreme, not give any border, not to give any information. That's wrong. The other extreme is wrong too. Too many borders would mean that instead of really composing and using his talent, the composer will be simply ticking the boxes he got from you. So you'd always be like, okay, so it must be this, I must use this instrument, it must be that, yeah, that's the form, oh geez, that doesn't work, what do I do? That's not composing, that's just, filling in the Sudoku. Actually, composing is pretty much like filling the Sudoku in a manner, but one shouldn't exaggerate it. It's still a creative process. If it's not, it's no fun. If it's no fun, it's not good. Reference tracks. This is another thing. Well, there are people, they just do this very often, like they throw, a bunch of recordings onto the composer and say, this is it, that way, right? It might be good, but if you do that, don't give too many, and do give always not only the recording, but also some advice, some information. I mean, like, okay, this track, the middle part is weak, but the beginning, I love it, And also, you feel the rhythm, it's so, it's punching. It's full of energy. Something like that we might use for this and that. And here, yeah, the other track, maybe the melody is not the most fanciest, but I like the sound, how it is accompanied with just simple, what is it? Is it harp or is it, guitar, okay, or whatever. These things. So always be specific, because otherwise, if you give him like 3 minutes of music, he would think of it like this is the ideal state of music. Okay, I should deliver this, and he will try. Whereas you like just like, 10 seconds of it. So be as specific as possible. Now, given these things, look at the first input of Daniel Vavra again. I mean, what he told me. He said symphony orchestra. I knew that because I was watching the game, and I knew even that was the first stretch goal of their Kickstarter campaign. What I didn't know, and what Daniel told me that evening in that pub, was that he was choosing the stretch goals. So he chose as a very first stretch goal that they are gonna have a recording with the live symphony orchestra. So I thought this is probably something he wants to do pretty much. If he wants to do it pretty much, it means music is pretty important for him in his project, which is good. Because it leads to one thing only, that I can knock his door at any time and ask for whatever I need. So that was like a very good information for me. Actually, the only unconscious he gave me, the others were conscious. Williams, yes, Zimmer, no. Okay, a quick example. I'll give you 2 themes. I'm not sure about whistling. Yeah, you hear it. So there are 2 themes. First goes, probably you realize and you know what it is. And the other one goes, da, da. Anybody knows? Yeah. Almost. I would say Inception, but yeah, Interstellar is quite similar. So the first is, of course, the unmistakably beautiful Indiana Jones. But yeah, the next one is, that's the way Zimmer does music. I mean, there is nothing wrong on it. He's extremely successful with it, and it goes so well with the films of Christopher Nolan. But you know what? The first theme, I was able to whistle. My original occupation is violinist. If I would carry violin here, don't worry, I didn't, I might play it for you, and you would realize and recognize the theme again. If, anybody can play this theme like with just one finger trying to type it on keyboard, like da, 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 and even with the wrong rhythm, everybody knows. Why is that so? Because the information of the theme is the melody itself, how it is built. Whereas, by the main sound of this Zimmer recording, of this Zimmer soundtrack, it's just the quality of the sound. That's what makes, the information. I don't say it is wrong, but the good thing on the Williams stuff is that if you have such a strong theme that you can recognize it even when I'm whistling it here, or when I would be playing it on violin, or in any possible shape, then the composer himself, Williams, can take the theme and he can alter it and change it and rearrange it into any possible other shape, and to deliver the same theme with completely different emotion. So, whereas the original indie theme is like a bit heroic, strong, maybe a bit masculine, but also it shows like, he's a man with a humor, he's kind of a guy who never grew up. He's this child in a grown man, And this is why we love Indiana Jones as a person, This is why the films are, I would say, successful, and this character is so important, so interesting. This is exactly what Williams did with his theme. But also, particularly in the first part, in the first film of the franchise, he took the same theme and he rewrote it into something tender, something intimate, something sad, or spooky, or whichever. It's just so versatile because it's fucking strong, And that's the way I like the film soundtracks and game soundtracks are being done. So not only I was like, okay, I prefer Williams more than Zimmer too. That's my personal taste, and it might actually not to do that much with my professional decisions, but well, still they do. But it shows me this: I can use the themes dramaturgically, And if you do this, you have the themes and you have them like sort of ghost persons in your story. You're maintaining them, and you decide when they appear, when they disappear, what they do, how they correlate together, and it creates a brand new universe of possibilities for the composer, and it might enrich your project, I believe. So this is why I call it a whistle test. Hollywood 60s, 70s is actually the same, strong melodies, yes. Then the Czech New Wave. Had Daniel said just the Czech New Wave and nothing else, not the names, I would be thinking about Liška. Zdeněk Liška, he was sort of experimenting in a, say Morricone 60s, 70s way, but in a Czech way, and a bit more classical, because he wasn't doing westerns. As Morricone, he was doing things with, Vláčil and others, like a very serious cinematography. So some of it is really psychedelic, a lot. I mean, Daniel pointed out, I want to have these psychedelic choirs. They are just great, just like, I love it. That must be in the game. I'm not sure if I delivered that one. Maybe that one not, but the rest I tried. Yeah, but he also mentioned Fischer, and that's something else. Luboš Fischer was the master of these simple melodies, simple chords, simple instrumentation, and yet if you see it in the score, you are like, there's nothing here. But then you hear it and you cry. So I started to understand, and this is actually the second part, what he gave me after that I don't need to be afraid being extremely emotional in a sort of oldish way, old-fashioned way. I would say nowadays, most of the soundtracks are like a bit cold, a bit, just set back a bit, just a bit distant, It's maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the zeitgeist, maybe it's the taste of our period, of our time. But I would say it's pity, Music has to be, here. It has to be as close as possible. It has to punch in your heart. If it doesn't, to me, this is not too much of a music. So I realized from all this, what Daniel gave me, that I'm actually, I have the right and the possibility to do such extremely emotional music. So, this is about Daniel Bhava and his first input. A couple of good ideas for you. Don't say viole in modo ordinarium a poco sul ponticello al punto col molto di vibrato. I don't speak Italian, save for these Italian vocabularies you need as a musician, because we all are trained in it, Classical music, musicians with classical background, they simply do know these things. So if you write this down for the viola player, he would really play it in the usual style, bit under the bridge, on the top of the bow, and with a lot of vibrato. That's what's written. He would just think about the composer, he's an idiot, because that's not necessary to write. But you can even ask for it. What I want to say, it's like, you better be sure what you're talking about. Because that happened to me, people came and they were like, we need, dulcimer, dulcimer, and contrabassun, surely, yes. And then, the tamburo piccolo, that would be wonderful. And if I get such an exact information, I do deliver exactly what I'm being told. But of course, it wouldn't sound the way that guy expected, because he didn't know what he was talking about. So better than fancy Italian words, keep that on the musician. That's his job. You don't need to know these things. Absolutely not. Explain the emotions. Explain your expectations. Explain what you want from the music. What you want, not how you want it to be done. That's his job. That's your job. Maybe this is actually the most important slide, save for the one with the dog and machine gun. But the musician should know his job. He should know what he's doing. If not, he's probably not in the right position. But you do know the game. I mean, when I started working in Warhorse, and I've been there for more than 3 years working on this project, but when I started with the day one, Daniel was working on that project for nearly 5 years already. And he was thinking about it, from the picture up of the lead designer, of the spiritual father of it all. So this is where the designers are strong, and this is where they can give the most important input for the composer. Right, for the second input, after all these things and meetings, the composer comes and he delivers first set of music, and it might be crap. Give it a chance, listen to it for a while, but I would say it should punch you, at least some of it should punch you on the first playing back. If it doesn't, it probably wouldn't be working for your audience either, not for your project, maybe for some other project. So, but yeah, be patient and try to tell him exactly what you don't like. Try to analyze. There is this thing, the way a man is gazing at a gorgeous woman, or a woman is gazing at the same gorgeous woman. I mean, the man goes like, oh, yes, that's it. The woman, she's like, oh yeah, she has these new blouse from Zara. There are sales now. That doesn't go along with the green skirt, Yeah, and the earrings, they totally spoil it. But a nice haircut, yeah. So, I mean, let's put aside the sexual or any other things of it, and the jealousness and hatred, and just focus on what actually happened, The man takes it as a whole, and that's the way most people are used to listen to music, like as a whole. I like it, I don't like it. It makes me emotional, it doesn't make me emotional. Nothing more. But professional musicians have to be like women in this. Women watching other women, analyzing, to make an analysis of it. Like, is this, what's good on it? Is it the skirt? Is it the blues? Is it the haircut? And what's wrong? Why it doesn't completely match? Oh yeah, it's the earrings, I knew it. So you try to do this. And if you don't know how to analyze the music you are listening to, it's okay. It's enough if you analyze the feelings you have. So just listen to it and be like, okay, what I feel. Is it boring? Oh yeah, it is boring. Why is it so? Because it makes me sleepy? Is it too slow? Or is it because the theme, the melody is no fancy, Or is it because it sounds like any other soundtrack I have heard so far? So these are the things you might think about and you might analyze. And this is actually the best feedback the composer can be given. Yeah. About temp tracks, very shortly. I would say don't use them, but most studios do, because at start of your project, you usually don't have enough money to pay even that lady who, cleans the room every 3 months. So, yeah, if you would probably pay her to come back, or you would pay some new coder or something. You wouldn't pay a musician, because that has time, right? But the problem with temp tracks is, once you use them, they stick to the situation. So if you have there some fancy cutscene everybody in the studio likes, and there is this temp track, which is like something, like Morricone stuff or Williams stuff or whatever. If you do this, and then the composer comes and he enters with his own new music, most probably you wouldn't like it. Why is that so? Because you have heard this temp track with the scene together 50 times already. And now, for the first time, you hear something else, and of course you don't like it, because it's different. It doesn't need to be worse. Well, if it's, compared to Morricone or Williams, it probably will be worse. But even if it would be better, you will not see it, because you are so much used to the original temp track you used. So if you do this, give it more chance. Like, listen to it twice or thrice in a row, give it 2 hours break, then again, then sleep over it, and then the next morning you can tell your composer, I'm sorry, but still it's shit. Okay? For further inputs, just quickly, there's one general rule I would like to point. You don't need to be everywhere, but be everywhere when it's for the first time. And it goes for music. If you have like new functionality in the game and the composer delivers the first track, always listen to it and do comment if you don't like it. Because if you don't, he will go on. And for such big game as a Kingdom Come Deliverance, for instance, you need like 10 tracks for every functionality or more, So that's the problem. If you let him do it the wrong way, he will end up with 10 wrong tracks. Stop him at the beginning and tell him, no, not here, there. Now, there you go. Yes, do this for him. Okay, be polite, but not that much that it will spoil the information. I would say this is also very important. Sometimes I'm an editor too, and I'm sending my comments to other composers or arrangers, and after 10 minutes of carefully writing an email, I'm like reading it, and I'm like, geez, I actually wanted to write him like, I'm sorry, but this is a big shit. What I'm writing is actually, it's not that bad, it just needs some minor changes. No, that's wrong. So, You don't need to say like, yeah, the track what you sent me, I absolutely don't like it at all. Well, not necessary to do that. If you say, I don't like it, or it wouldn't work, it's a no-go already. You don't need to go on, but do say that, and do say it just exactly, so he knows. Yeah. As for cutscenes, proper spotting sessions. Proper spotting session mean that you really sit with the composer and you go through every single cutscene where you want the music to be. Explain him what is going on, and again, go for the original emotions, the overall feelings of the cutscene. Don't tell him what kind of instruments he's about to use or something. That's his job. Better tell him what do you expect than how he has to do that. Yeah, in the end, well, composers having a hard job, but probably the most beautiful one. I mean, like, as I've said, it's harder than opera to me. But, you know, the frightening thing is, there are two frightening things. First, the adaptivity of music, that it changes, you know, it's never the same for any player in the world. And secondly, that you have to deliver music in a finished state for a completely unfinished game. So it's like a shifting sands, you know, when you need to go through it. This is actually very frightening. So if you meet your composer one day at the corridor, you will have a, a good mood, you know, and you will full of energy and something, probably thanks to drugs or something. Do cheer him up, you know, and tell him like the last couple of tracks you have seen or heard are really first class and you love what he's doing. He might return the favor one day and you might need it. I would say that's the... Yes, we are there. Okay, thank you very much, that's all. Mám jít pryč? Questions. Wow. Okay, 3 questions. Well.
Hey there.
Yeah, hi.
Yo. You showed some interesting numbers about manpower and how long did it take, but I just forgot how many hours of music and how long is the overall average gameplay, you would say?
For Kingdom Come Deliverance, well, we started with the design document saying 30 to 40 hours, then it was enlarged, and it was like 40 to 50. I would say the average is over 50, like 50 something, but it can be like 100, 200, right? Which means like, yeah.
And for those 50 hours of gameplay, that was 500 hours of music, right? No. For those 50 hours of gameplay, how much music was there?
For those 50 hours of music, there is 5 hours or 6 hours of music in total. But of course, we do have a silence, which, you know, makes it a bit better. So you can generally say, you know, you have types of music like cutscenes, and you hear them only for one time when you see the cutscene. And then you have, of course, the in-game music, which repeats on and on, because although we have many tracks, their number isn't endless, right? So maybe this is like, but we were counting what we have, and statistically it's like over the 50 hours you might hear every track about 10 times. So this is every 5 hours, and we would be like, we can stand it, we can go with it. That was the design decision. Okay, thank you.
And if there is some other question, there might be one over there.
Yeah, hello. So personally, what's your favorite part of the soundtrack?
Hard to say. Well, I, of course, tend to say the one which we recorded in the Rolfino because it was so cool and whatever. But actually, there are a couple of silent, you know, just dreamy kind of tracks in the exploration, particularly if you walk the meadows, you know, and fields and so on. And I might say that these make me sometimes move with my own music, which is awful, I know, but they do. And also, and that's maybe the strongest cutscene in the game, is the dream about your parents. Well, yeah, sorry, spoiler, if you didn't play it, you should do this. I mean, and there I would say, that was a good thing. I mean, I've got the screenplay first. I didn't have anything else. So I just sketched the music based on the screenplay. And then I've got the first edit of the real video, and I put it with the music, and it matched. This is incredible. So I would take it like this is a sign. It's a good music. So that's another favorite of mine for this soundtrack.
So you compose most of it only with the screenplay?
Once again?
You composed most of the music only with the screenplay?
Well, that depends what you got. I mean, like, yeah, if I would have more time, that's what I wanted to show, but no chance. It'll be already too much. What I've got, that wasn't the final stage. The problem is, as I said, you make finished music in a finished state to an unfinished game. That's the problem. And it goes for instance, for cutscenes as well. So what I've got was this Star Trek version where everybody looked the same, there were no textures, and it was gray. Henry was, I think, red, and all the other persons were green or something. So that's, for instance, and that was already good, because you see the timing, and you hear the character saying, you know, and you see them moving. But yeah, in the early stages, I even got it like, I got the screenplay, and at least I had to prepare some tracks, you know, some musical ideas and some dramaturgy, without knowing the proper timing. Okay?
Okay, and thank you again very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.